Welcome to Leadership 321. My name's Brian Webster and I'm your host. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Geoffrey Walker, who's been a nurse for almost 39 years, the last 16 years of which he's been working as a matron and now currently works as a senior nursing advisor for a large NHS trust. So today we're going to chat about Geoffrey's 3 tips and best practices for you to become a leader or a better leader. He's also going to share 2 leadership examples of when things have went well regarding leadership. And lastly, he's going to focus on the stance and style of leadership he prefers, which is authentic leadership. So please do enjoy the podcast. Please do tune into the blog, which is accompanying alongside the podcast, where you can either listen or watch the podcast and get some further information on everything we spoke about today. So I hope you enjoy it and please do give us your feedback. Cheers. Bye-bye. Hello, Geoffrey. Thanks very much for joining us for our very first podcast on Learning Leadership 321. It's amazing to have you here and really exciting to get the podcast started with yourself. So a good friend professionally and personally. So we've got your intro, we've done all that, and people could link into your bio on the blog and find out a bit more about you and your amazing career thus far. But I thought we would do a bit of an icebreaker and a bit of a, just to make things a bit easier. So my first thing I've been looking at is gratitude. Now, you might have heard a bit about gratitude, but I thought we would start off by me asking you, maybe in the past couple of days, what's made you smile, Geoffrey, and why?
I think the thing that makes me smile more than anything is just enjoying what I'm doing. You know, one of the things that made me smile this morning was I opened the front door or the back door to go out into the garden, pitch black, and next door's cat jumped over to get some treats, scared me to death, and I jumped out of my skin. So that made me smile. But I think the most important thing is just being positive. I just
Great.
like to be positive. And if I have a bad day, I put it down to having a bad day, not a bad week or a bad month.
Well, that's it. That's a good point, actually. And, we can't buy any of the past back with any amount of money or anything. So it's like you say, just focus on the next day. Great. Okay, so that's great. So the next part is I want to read you a quote, if that's okay. So let me just get the quote up. And the idea is, Geoffrey, that you'll just quickly give your initial response. So
Yes.
the quote is, when you are called to lead, you are called to serve. So what's your initial response to that and your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting one, actually. When you're called to lead, you're called to serve. I think as a leader, you serve the people you lead. But I also think you have to have your own conviction to take things forward, which doesn't always make you popular. But on initially listening to that, I would think, no, actually, you're not there to serve, but I believe you are. It's a really good quote, that one, makes you think. So I believe
Absolutely.
if you're a leader, you are there to serve.
Great. There we go. Right. So that was just the 2 small little icebreakers just
Yeah.
to make it a bit softer and get into things. So as the listeners will know, it's called 321 because you're going to give us 3 of your best practice leadership
Mhm.
tips and pointers that we can all learn from as either current leaders or aspiring leaders, and then 2 of your examples of when leaderships went well, and then your 1 leadership style. So do you want to start us off with your 3 tips, Geoffrey?
Great, Brian. I will do. And thank you once again for inviting me to speak to you today. I think it's so important that we do share knowledge and actions. It's really good. So I would start off by saying, number 1, build your personal resilience. When you're a leader, you can often feel as though you're attacked from all directions, and that can often happen. But you have to be resilient. You've got to think, what makes me strong and how can I deal with this? What is the important things in your life that you need to focus on other than work, and then move forward from that? Resilience comes from within. So if you're having a bad day, if you're having a bad meeting, if you're just finding it difficult, think about yourself. Take time out. Time out is brilliant for resilience. If you think, before I go to this next meeting, I'd rather be 5 minutes late and go in alert than go in completely off kilter because the last meeting or the last person I spoke to threw me. So personal resilience is very important. It's often quite a selfish concept, but it isn't selfish in the long run because you're the leader. And if there is a problem with you, there will be a problem all the way down the chain of command. And so I believe that think about yourself, think about what makes you strong, and build on that. So my second one, I would say, is never take things personally. So it goes a little bit back to resilience.
Yeah.
When you are dealing with issues, whether it be on a personal level with a one-to-one member of staff, on a strategic level, or whatever level you are dealing with as part of your work, you will be subject to dissension. I'll use the word dissension, often it's attack, but we will call it dissension. But remember to have the courage of your convictions and work around any issues that are given. It's very important to listen to people because often when you go into something, you have a clear decision of what you want to do. But when you listen to others, you think, wow, I think I could change that slightly. So changing your mind, readapting, moving the goalposts is all part of leadership. It's not about you got it wrong in the first place. It's about working through it. I always say one of the quotes I like to use is the worst form of decision is indecision. So sometimes you have to make a decision and then adjust it. But people will follow you if you listen. But you also have to have that word, I agree with you, but we need to take this forward in a different way. So I think don't take it personally. If it's delivered personally, then deal with it immediately because you are not there to be personally attacked. You have to accept that some of the decisions you make may warrant people questioning, not going with that decision or not being happy with that decision. And you have to use your negotiation skills. Dictation doesn't work. We will do it this way. Does not work. I've listened to what you've said. I've taken on board your ideas and some I can go with. However, I have to make this decision and this is what we will do. So don't take it personally. And my third point, which I think every leader needs to have, is be brave. You have to be brave. You cannot just go through life as a leader agreeing, not challenging, or indeed following the status quo. I've always believed I'm a challenger. It hasn't
Right.
always got me well liked, but it hasn't got me disliked. You know, as a leader, you may not always be loved, but you need to be respected, not hated. And so be brave. If you don't agree with someone that you work with directly alongside, beneath, or someone higher than you have to disagree. Because at the end of the day, whatever level you sit as a leader, you are the safety net for the person above. And if that person is having a difficult day or not feeling themselves, and they're going to make a decision which you feel is fundamentally wrong, whether that would affect patient care, staffing, or just any issue, then you have a moral obligation to say, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. And then going back to my second one, don't take it personally. If they don't agree with you and you are not happy with it, that's fine. But you've challenged and you've given your opinion. The most important thing to remember in leadership is that even though you may be the leader, you're still part of the team. And therefore, being brave is very important. I have often challenged, I've often been attacked for the things that I've said or the way in which I've put them. But I have, at the end of the day, felt that was my right to do so. If the person then says, I've listened to you, I don't agree, this is what we'll do, your conscience is clear. But I would take it one stage further. If you believe that that decision that the person is making would affect patient care, would affect staffing, or would affect or place people at risk, you not only have a moral, but a legal obligation to pass that on to somebody more senior to deal with. It is better to make a decision and be brave and realize you may have got it wrong than to keep quiet and somebody gets hurt. We can always use that word we all hate using, but it's really important, and that's sorry. We can always say sorry, but what we can't do is undo it if we sat quietly and allowed an issue to occur.
Brilliant. Wow, this is great. Amazing. So build your resilience, be brave, and oh my goodness, your second one was
Don't take it personally.
that was it. Don't take it personally. Great. So I was just thinking as you were saying all that, do you think there's a role for emotional intelligence in your 3 points?
Oh, I think it's very, very important, emotionally intelligence. I think the moment you believe you're perfect, you've failed. You know, none of us are perfect. And I have always believed that I can learn from anyone. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter who it is, you can learn from them. Once you believe that you are the person who knows everything, then you're on a hiding to nothing. You know,
Wow.
if I was in my office and one of the cleaning staff came along and said, I don't like the look of Mrs. X, I would go out and have a look. Why would
Right.
I not? Because we all have the ability to notice things, whoever we are. And that's not demeaning cleaning because it's absolutely vitally essential. But that cleaner is working amongst patients and working with people all the time. They are chatting, they are noticing. And once we believe that we're too high and mighty to deal with something, we will fail. So yeah, absolutely. Emotional intelligence is really, it's a strange concept actually, because we all believe it, that we have it, and very
Mhm.
often we don't. Very often we don't. And I would take it one stage further. I would say that we all have an animal instinct.
Mhm.
It's the fight and flight. And very often, our first instinct is exactly the correct one, but we talk ourselves out of it and we say, no, that can't be right, that can't be right. Sometimes go with the flow. But
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely believe in emotional intelligence.
It's funny actually you say that because we hear about nurses' gut instinct and some people don't believe it, but I think it's a thing. It's definitely a thing. You know, if you just feel Mrs. X is not right, then Mrs. X probably isn't right.
Mhm.
So
And
yeah,
you do that when you
definitely.
walk around, don't you? When you're walking around with your patients, whether it's in the community, private sector, or whether you're working in the NHS in an acute trust, you get a feeling when you walk into that area there's a problem or there isn't, and you've got
Mhm.
to go with that.
Definitely, yeah. Okay, so that's great. That's your 3 points. That's perfect. So what about your two examples then of when leaderships went well? So this could be in your current role or previous roles or whenever you like. When has it went well and why?
Well, I've been a nurse for almost 39 years. And the one thing that I've always learned from the very beginning when I was being taught as a student, and teachers would say, well, we didn't do that in our day, was never say that again. So I've always believed you jump forward. You cannot change the past. You can only influence the present and influence the future. So I'm going to talk about my role now because I'm a senior nursing advisor in an acute trust. And the first thing I'd like to say that I'm really proud of is that we decided that one of the most, not undervalued, but perhaps one of the most difficult roles is that of the Band 7 ward leader,
Hmm.
because you are often dealing with issues from your subordinates and you're often being crushed from above to achieve. And it is a very difficult job. And you usually have a caseload.
Mm.
So what I first found when I was going round was that there is no voice for the band sevens to feel comfortable at airing problems. So
Okay.
I started together with my colleague an action learning set in which the band sevens can come along. We have 2 hours. We start off with a theme because I think it's really important to start off with a theme. It might be resilience, might be emotional intelligence, it might be leadership. And
Hmm.
then we allow them to say what their problems are in a completely safe environment that isn't minuted, and we can then give advice. So, for example, they may say, because it is an issue, I really do my rotas well. I try to cover all my shifts, and Ward X never does it. So I end up sending them help, and it's really annoying me. And
Yeah.
that is an annoying thing if you do it right. So we then work around as a group. Why is that happening? How can
Hmm.
we support each other? The most important thing is allowing people to say, I'm not happy. We
Right.
all feel as a nurse we should cope, we should deal with it, we should always smile. But actually, when you're a leader, you can have days, in fact, you can have weeks where you're not happy because many things are not fitting in together. So in these groups, they can come along and chat. Now, when we first started, two attended. Now it's sitting room only because they
Gee
feel,
whiz.
standing room only, I should say, because they actually feel, our band sevens, that they can voice a concern. They probably don't want or know that any action can be taken. It's about getting it off your chest
Yeah.
and saying, you know, I feel this is happening. So that was the first one. The second one, as part of the work in our trust, we interviewed all our internationally educated nurses for two reasons. One, to see how they're doing and how they're, if they're enjoying their work, and have we got them in the right place? And two, how can we support you in your career development? You know, one of the things that we forget is that our international nurses, A, may be working in a second language, and B, may have been very highly qualified in their own areas in their country of origin, and yet we place them where we feel we have a gap rather than playing to their skills. So that was really good, because we would hear from some of our nurses who said, well, I've got 12 years in cardiology and they've placed me on orthopedic trauma. Well, that ain't going to work, is it? We're going to lose them at some point. So now we worked as a team together with our HR, recruitment, etc., and said, look, let's look at what we have and the skills of our international nurses and place them in that area. The other thing that people, we wanted to retain our international nurses, and what we have to recognize is that the cost of living in the United Kingdom is high, and it's very high in different areas. So, for example, where I come from originally in Cumbria, you may pay 550 to 650 for a 3-bedroomed house renting. Where my hospital sits in Dorchester, it's 1,300. So that is a big, big change. So we wanted to look at how we can help and support and work with our international nurses to recognize that, to help them understand and work with them as part of the team to find accommodation that is affordable. And also to look at how we can support you with your families. You know, very often our international nurses don't realize they can request flexible working patterns. And one of the most important things that we feel very proud of in our trust is that if you are an international nurse and you're married or have a partner, we try to help your partner find work.
Oh, wow.
Very often within the trust, so that we can balance that working process together. So that we can say, you know, if you're working Monday, Tuesday, your partner can be working other days or opposite, so that we can balance family life and help and support. So I feel really happy that we go out and we recruit international nurses. It's very important we support them. And we need to look at how we can progress them through the grading and career structure. You know, agenda for change and banding, we very often find our international nurses is in the lower bands, not because they can't aspire to be higher, but they need some coaching, help and support to do that. So that's what we do as senior nurse advisors.
Wow, those are two really interesting examples, aren't they? So I think your first one probably, in my view, would be a bit of compassionate leadership. So you're showing compassion to these band sevens about their troubles and their issues and problems, and giving them that voice, which is really interesting. And then your next example of the international nurses, to me, sounds a bit like collective leadership. So, you know, it's like you say, you're choosing somebody, a cardiology nurse, and putting them in orthopedics. That's just silly, isn't it? It's nonsense. And, you know, it's like me. So I have colour blindness, red-green colour blindness. So I usually have to say that to an area. So, you know, I probably am going to struggle with the urinalysis. So if you do my urinalysis, I'll do your drugs. You know, it's about that collective, picking the people and putting them best at where they're going to do the best role and the best task. And I was smiling thinking about your agenda for change and your difference in rent, because of course the salary in Cumbria and Dorchester are probably the same salary. That
exactly the same.
That doesn't change, does it? I think you only get a substitute in, is it London? You get a bit more.
London and just outside of, yes.
Yeah. But interestingly, in Scotland, if you relocate to up the way, the Highlands up north, you get relocation packages. You probably get that in a lot of places, but yeah, the salary doesn't change. But that's another conversation, isn't it?
It is a conversation. But what we do is we help with subsidising rents for the first 6 months.
Oh, wow.
To allow people to settle and understand where they are. And we have accommodation for 6 months.
Now
So that
stop it, you'll have
helps.
me down there in no time with all
Listen,
these
I'll give
incentives.
you a job tomorrow, Brian. You know, you could come tomorrow, but I think it is really important. I think for me, the band seven is pivotal.
Mhm.
And what we do in today's world, and the one thing I said I would never do, I'm going to harp back to when I first qualified. And that was when we used to, you know, you were actually supported during training. It didn't cost you any money to train. So when people qualified, there's a clear structure. You worked on a ward or in an area, you worked your way up and you became a band seven. By the time you got there, you had a clear understanding of the role.
Mm.
Sometimes if you applied for a band seven, there'll be 8 or 9 applicants. I am seeing now band sevens coming up with no applicants. So
Wow.
therefore we have an issue. And the issue is we're not supporting teaching, training, and taking through leadership. And then we promote through panic. We need
Mm.
to fill a place rather than put that person in the position because they are capable of doing that. But what we always must do is once they're in that position, support and coach and help.
Mhm.
Instead, we often allow people to flounder.
Yeah.
You know, we put them in that position, we've ticked the box, we've got the band seven, we've got a leader, but we need to work with that leader. And, you know, it isn't about mentorship. I think mentorship is important, but for me at that level, it's about coaching. And
Mhm.
that is my role with my colleague as a senior nurse advisor. We work alongside our nurses to say, look, let's look at the way we're doing this. Let's work together and allow them to develop their skills. We do work in a very different world. In the 21st century, you know, nursing 50,000 vacancies. If we are to retain, then we have to work with that person because a good leader retains staff. I
Mhm.
firmly believe people leave their jobs for only 3 reasons. One, they get promotion. Two, they leave the area. Three, they're under bad leadership. And the
Right.
third, we can control. So if we work with people to be good leaders, support them, leadership's an art and it's a wonderful art. Once you become a leader, you enjoy leading. And then you will become entrepreneurial. You will push the boundaries and take your services forwards. But we have to give you the tools of the trade to do that. So simply giving you a band seven does not give you leadership skills. You have got your clinical skills, otherwise you would not have that level. Now we need to support you.
Definitely, yeah. And it's interesting. There is some formal leadership programs, isn't there? But not everyone gets onto them. It's all sort of voluntary. Sometimes you have to pay for them, so it's not ideal. And I've said before, I've got some formal leadership experience that's probably more than some of the people that I've been, subordinate to and things, which is interesting. So it's a shame because it's a big task, isn't it, to be a band seven? And sometimes you have to have your own caseload, as you say. District nursing is a good example. So district nursing on agenda for change sits on a band six, but you're the team leader as well as having the caseload of the whole area of patients. So that could be 100 up to 400 as well as being a district nurse, so you're providing clinical skills. So agenda for changes, yeah, we could chat about that some other time.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think we, look at district nursing. I'm very much an acute nurse, intensive care trained, cardiology trained. But if I had an issue, a worry, or a problem, I picked up the phone and there was a doctor there in 2 minutes. If
Mm.
you're in the middle of the Highlands in somebody's front room, you have to make a decision. And I will just share one thing. When I started to do my own clinics, I spoke to a consultant and they said, "What worries you about the clinic?" I said, "Sending someone home." That is the biggest worry because you put people through all of these tests and then you can go home. So we can never underestimate that. And I know it is for another discussion, but band six is very low for somebody making those decisions.
Often with no cell service, so you're in the front room with no telephone access either.
Well, I mean, I'm smiling because I can remember you sending me a picture. You were going to visit one of your clients, and there was cows on the road, and you had to move the cows before you could get down the lane. Now that doesn't happen in an urban area like where I live, and if it did, it would be catastrophic. But it does bring it home to you. The difference, nursing is multifaceted. We need a lot of skills, and in order to hone those skills, we need good leaders to support us.
Perfect. Okay, so let's move on to the last point, which is your favoured leadership style. So we'll both know as leaders that leadership styles should be fluid, and sometimes if there's a cardiac arrest, we need an authoritarian leader to say, right, Geoffrey, you're on the chest, Brian, you need to get access. So compassionate leadership, for example, in a cardiac arrest might not work. So there is a time and a place for different styles, but you've chosen authentic leadership. So I've had a bit of a look into this, and I wondered what your reasonings for choosing this was, and what your examples are, or why you practice that style.
I think I chose authentic leadership because it's a little bit about me. So often we are not authentic. We try to be everything to everyone and not to ourselves. And I mean about life, not just about nursing. So when I looked at the concept of authentic nursing leadership, I thought, yeah, that just fits it. Looking at transparency, looking at being genuine, looking at honesty, really three key pivotal positions to a leader. And if we sort of extrapolate that a little bit, it's about being self-aware, relationship transparency, being genuine. If I don't agree with you, it's better to say so. So often if you came along, Brian, and you said, oh, Geoffrey, you're my leader, I really want to be a band 6. Do you think I can make it? I would have to be genuine and say at that moment, actually, Brian, I think at this moment you're not ready. But if you've got that thirst for knowledge, I'll work with you, I will coach you, and I will take you forward. It is so easy to say, oh, yeah, go for it.
Mm.
And then you don't get it. And then I have to tell you why. And quite rightly, you would say, why didn't you tell me that in the first place?
Mm.
So being genuine, it's a balancing process about being fair-minded. It's about treating everybody individually. The first thing a staff will pick up is if you have favourites. Believe me, staff will know right away if you have a favourite. And so, it's about being fair-minded. It's about allowing everybody equal opportunities. And it's about being able to internalize your decision-making to do the right thing. I always say this, that managers do things right, leaders do the right thing. That can be quite different, because doing things right might say that if you get an agency nurse this afternoon, you'll be overspent, so you can't do it. A leader would say, if I didn't, patient care would suffer, so I'm going to be overspent. So that gives a little bit of an example. So I think as an authentic leader, sometimes you just have to internalize and do the right thing. It's maintaining a moral perspective. It's about being moralistic. It's about saying to yourself, do you know what? I've weighed up the issues. I've looked at the pros and cons, but actually I'm going to have to go with what I believe is right in the interest of the staff, the patient care, and the patient. Because at the end of the day, it's the patient that's at the center. Sometimes when people have asked me questions and have said, what is the most important part of a hospital? I will say the staff, and people will say, why will you say that and not the patient? And I would always say that because if you have a disenfranchised workforce, you are not going to have perfect patient care. No. If you have an empowered workforce who feel they can be listened to, they can work on what they want to do, and you will help and support, you will have excellent patient care. And that's the most important thing. So I think with authentic leadership, it allows you to be you.
That's amazing. Thanks very much. And what a great place to end. So what I'll do is I'll do a bit of a write-up on authentic leadership and share some online resources for the listeners and the readers so they can have a bit of a delve more into your chosen style. So thank you very much for spending the time today, Geoffrey. It's an honour to have you as the first guest. And similarly, like we started with a bit of gratitude, I wanted to end with a bit of gratitude. So when you go to bed tonight, what is the most grateful thing you're grateful for in your life?
My health.
Health.
Without a doubt. People will say, what is the most important thing in your life? And I would say your health. And that is why we work in the most important sphere. We work in healthcare. And when people have their health, you can deal with, fight with, action anything. So when I go to bed every night, I thank myself and my life for being healthy.
Amazing. And I love how I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that, and
You
you
didn't
answered
tell me
it
that,
within
no.
seconds.
Yeah.
Well, not even seconds. You had it. It was on the tip of your tongue.
I think
Perfect. Just
I think it's so important. But what I would like to say, Brian, is thank you so much. It's been a real honor for me to be the first. I've watched you develop your career and will watch continually develop, both as a friend and as a coach and mentor. But I would also like to say to listeners, through you, they can ask me any question they wish, and I will help and support. And I hope that we can do more of these. But thank you.
Great. That's great. Perfect. Thanks very much, Geoffrey. So in today's podcast, we chatted to Geoffrey Walker, who's been a nurse for over 39 years and is currently a senior nursing advisor. So Geoffrey talked about his 3 leadership tips and practices. So Geoffrey told us we need to be brave as leaders, we need to be resilient as leaders, and we also need to not take things personally. So this was a really great chat about these 3 points, and I hope that these are helpful for you in your leadership journey. Geoffrey also gave his 2 amazing examples of his leadership when it's went well and went good. So we talked about how Band 7s in his trust have got an open space where they can come and share their concerns or issues and get advice from Geoffrey and his colleague as senior nursing advisors. And I talked about this was probably a bit of compassionate leadership. They as leaders were showing compassion to the Band 7 leaders and a hope that they could build and grow them as leaders. And then the other example from Geoffrey was his international nurses and the fact that they're looking at placing these nurses in the areas that they're specially working in. So, you know, the international nurse might be a cardiology nurse for 15 years, but we place them in orthopedics, which is a bit inappropriate and a bit silly, really. So Geoffrey's leadership example was about placing these nurses where their skills fit. And I chatted about that being collective leadership, where we look at a person's skills, assets, and abilities and place them where it best fits. And lastly, we talked about Geoffrey's favourite leadership style, which was authentic leadership. And Geoffrey talked about the self-efficiency and self-awareness and the ability to lead by example as an authentic leader and why he was an authentic leader. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast and stay tuned for the next one. Do check out the blog because the blog will have extra reading, a summary of what we chatted about and much more on there. And we look forward to seeing you on the next blog.